Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours FM, episode 102. I'm your host, Carrie Dills, and you may notice that there's no one on with me yet, and that is because my very special guest is having some equipment difficulties and will be along shortly. But I didn't want to keep you waiting because I know that you're taking some time out of your very busy day to tune in, and I appreciate that tremendously. So before we get cranking here with my guest, I'll just tell you a couple things that are going on. First of all, thank you very much to those of you who left me some iTunes reviews a couple weeks ago. When I had Matt Medeiros on, we were kind of teasing that he was beating me in iTunes, and and some of you went to bat. So I appreciate the gold stars there. Also, I have a very special announcement, but I'm going to wait. To make that in a little while. But I would like to thank. You know what? It is hard to just talk and moderate your breath. I don't know if anybody else has trouble with that. I do. Anyhow, with that extreme awkwardness, I would love to thank today's sponsors. I've got Rebecca Gill over at Web Savvy Marketing. She is sponsoring us with her course, To the Top SEO, and it's a course. It's a multi-part course where you go through and learn all kinds of goodness about SEO that you can implement on past content if you've already got a library of content or your future content going forward. I'm actually trying it out over on carriedills.com. Got a little experiment over there that I'm posting if you want to go check that out. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey, Carrie, how's it going?
All right.
Sorry, I'm a little bit late here. I'm like in the process of moving into this house and this office here, and this is actually the first recording that I'm doing it here. So.
Oh, well, excellent. Well, no worries. I was just letting folks know that if they wanted to pick up Rebecca's course, they can save 25% with the coupon code LOVEOfficeHoursFM. So with that, say an official hello to you, Brian. New house. Had you had the baby yet?
Yes. Yeah. We welcomed our second daughter almost 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So, it's a little crazy around here right now.
Yeah. So growing your family, moving into a new place, you have just a little bit going on.
Yep.
So thanks for taking a little chunk out of your Thursday to hang out with myself and my listeners.
No problem. By the way, we're live right now?
Yeah, we're live.
Oh,
I mean,
awesome.
The entire world, I'm going to say upwards of 3 people are watching this right now. So
all right.
It's a packed house. So for folks that have not had the pleasure of coming across your content on the web or meeting you in person, can you give us kind of the rundown who you are and what you do?
Sure. So Brian Casel, my personal blog where I've been writing and I have my email newsletter and everything is over at castjam.com. And I've been writing there for many years, but I think only people have started reading it probably 2 or 3 years ago. These days I write a lot about building a productized service business. I teach a course about that, and I'm now running my second productized service business. The first one was called Restaurant Engine, which is a web design service for the restaurant industry. I exited that business. I sold it last year in 2015, and around that same time, I started my current business, Audience Ops, which does content marketing as a service for mostly B2B software companies, online services, and that sort of thing. So, and that's what running Audience Ops is basically my full-time job today, but I still try to write. I also co-host a podcast called Bootstrapped Web with my buddy Jordan Gal. And, we talk about bootstrapping, running an online business, and that sort of fun stuff. I just recently launched another kind of a side project podcast called the Productize Podcast, where I've got I lined up around 50, it's like a season of 15 episodes that are scheduled out for the rest of this year. Just talking with people who are running productized service businesses or in the process of launching, or they're successful, and just kind of talking through using that business model, because I'm all about it. As I said, I'm on my second business that's fully using the productized service model, and I just love everything that it has to offer, especially for freelancers and consultants who are trying to make that leap from consulting, billing by the hour into doing some sort of product or building up some sort of company. I think that productized services are a really great bridge to get there.
I'm fascinated by it, and I've actually listened to your. I've only caught one episode of your new podcast, but Bootstrapped Web I've been a fan of for a long time. I've actually cut my grass many times listening to that podcast, and it's funny because I'll hear and something that triggers a light bulb, and I'll want to go and jot it down, but I'm in the middle of mowing, so it's not terribly convenient. But I would love to kind of dig into this concept of productized consulting, productized services. For someone who's not familiar with the term, how would you define it?
Sure. I like to look at it like delivering a highly focused service that essentially solves one specific problem for one type of customer or one ideal customer. And I like to compare it a lot to freelancing or consulting, billing by the hour. I mean, I came from a background as a freelance web designer. I was working with, WordPress for many years and doing design and front-end development and all that. And for years, I was taking on projects from all sorts of clients, doctors, lawyers, universities, nonprofits, e-commerce stores, you name it. Every project was completely different. Every client was different. They came from different places. They had different requests, different requirements. And every single time I would need to essentially redefine what my service is. Like I would have to create a whole long proposal and customize it and spend, a day writing the proposal, go out and meet with clients and do a discovery process, try to figure out what they need, how much it's going to cost, how much time it's going to take. And just repeating that process over and over again, it got to be a grind. I mean, I won maybe half of those projects, and that was enough to have a comfortable living, but it wasn't enough to build a business that scaled beyond just me. Because when I'm doing something different for every single client, you can't build that into a system or a process, and you can't start to bring in other people to take on roles in that process. So looking at the productized service model, you can basically define, okay, this is the one thing that we do. This is the one painful problem that we know that this type of client has. Let's build a whole optimized process and a system to be the best possible solution to solve that. And it starts with kind of doing the research and talking to customers and figuring out what that problem is and finding the solution. But then, once you start to figure that out and you start to deliver it for active clients, like paying customers, you can start to document into standard operating procedures, okay, step by step, this is how we do things. And then you can start to bring in a team and build it up as a machine.
So you say you kind of had to do that initial research to find out what those problems were that you could solve. Who were you interviewing, past clients, or like, for instance, how did you stumble on Restaurant Engine?
I think everything that I've started, and this is probably pretty similar for most entrepreneurs, it comes out of some past experience that you've had. So Restaurant Engine was born out of the fact that I had been using WordPress quite a bit, and I saw a need to that small business owners, like, the process for getting a WordPress website up and running was painful and completely mysterious. To people like us, it's super easy. A couple clicks, you can do a one-click install, install WordPress, get a theme, couple plugins. But for a small business owner like a restaurant, they don't even know what like a web hosting service is, let alone what WordPress is. So putting all those pieces together is kind of a daunting prospect, and they just don't have the time or the expertise to do that. So the initial idea was to create some sort of hosted website builder built on WordPress. And I knew that I needed to focus on a niche in order to make every website basically the same and have the same set of features, the same requirements, so that I'm not doing anything and everything just like I was doing before. And then I kind of just randomly picked restaurants. I made a list of like 10 different niche verticals, restaurants, hotels, doctors, car dealerships, a couple others. And I kind of landed on restaurants. But then with audience ops, again, it was built out of my past experience. So I had spent about 4 years working on Restaurant Engine and building that up to a point where we had, leads and customers coming in. We had a team, sales team, customer support team, and all that. And the main way that we marketed that was through content marketing. So I had hired writers, and I built up processes for our team to follow, and it's to a point where Restaurant Engine was publishing a new article for the restaurant industry every week. I was completely hands off with that. Like, I wasn't writing articles for the restaurant industry or coming up with topics or doing social media promotion or any of that. I had my team do it, and it took me like 3 or 4 years to build up this system. And then I started talking about that at conferences, writing about it on my blog, talking about it on the podcast, and I would start to get a lot of questions from other online business owners saying, content is, I'm a founder. I have no time to write blog posts myself, or I don't have the expertise for it. How do you hire writers? How do you build up the system? How do you do it? And that's kind of what led me into the idea to do a productized service around delivering that, like content marketing to plug into your company.
And that's the audience ops.
Mm-hmm.
Random, just a side question, but are you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how organized are you as a human?
I think I'm sure my teammates on Audience Ops would tell you I'm like extremely organized and detail oriented. If you look at our Google Docs, our standard operating procedures, I take great care into building these systems and making sure everything is documented and formatted correctly. But that's online. That's the business. At home, if you look at my house right now, it's like covered in like boxes and wrappers, and it's kind of a mess around here.
Well, to be fair, you just moved.
That's true. I don't know how much cleaner it's gonna get, but
I was always been curious if certain, like an A-type personality or someone who is just typically a very organized person, if they are bent more towards a productized offering because they just think that way. It's just a theory.
I actually think about it in many ways like a developer, like a coder, because, and I don't really come from a background as like a programmer, but I did front end development, HTML, CSS, and then heavily into WordPress and a little bit of jQuery here and there. So I know how to essentially make a website work, right? And in order to do that, you kind of know how to connect one piece to the next piece to the next piece and troubleshoot. Okay, something's not displaying correctly. Where in the line is something broken? Where is there a missing piece of code or something? And so I really think of productized services or just building processes for a business in very much the same way. We've got step by step. This person handles step 1, 2, and 3. Then they hand it off to this person, steps 4, 5, and 6. And it's kind of like if this, then that. Everything has a path for how things are supposed to be executed and delivered. And it's not completely rigid. And there are definitely areas where, we hire writers who are extremely talented and creative, and it's their job to do their own research and come up with really creative and insightful topics. So the creative aspect is still there, but the way that we put it all together, from the writer writes the draft, it goes to an editor who does the editing, and then it goes to an assistant who sets it up in WordPress. We can still be creative with it, but we just deliver it and on a schedule and a process.
Oh, that makes total sense. I forgot to mention it earlier, but for those of you who are listening live, if you have a question for Brian, you can send it in via the Google Q&A app or on Twitter using the hashtag OfficeFM. So can you kind of walk through, because you're talking about you've documented all the steps, you're doing this process, you said it's not rigid, but I'm sure it's kind of like a living, breathing document. As things change, as you realize.
Yeah, we actually have many documents. So every little thing gets its own document. I think at this point we have something like maybe 60 or 70 different Google Docs.
Documents for everyone.
Yeah. And everything from how to set up a blog post in WordPress to what our process is for building a list of topics for an editorial calendar, to how a manager onboards a new client into our service. All that stuff gets a document, basically.
And is that something like, let's go back to the beginning of audience ops. So you've decided that you want to offer this service. How much is actually documented at the front versus you just going through it for the first time and kind of documenting as you go? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The thing I love about this whole model is that you can launch it extremely quickly. I launched audience ops probably in a matter of 2 weeks. From the day that the initial concept came together, and I remembered I was actually at MicroConf in Vegas 2015, and I had an extra day after the conference to kill, and I was in the hotel room just writing notes. After speaking to a bunch of founders at MicroConf, the idea became clear, like, all right, this is a real painful problem that needs to be solved. And so I wrote down notes for concepts for what the business was like. Anyway, I spent the next 2 weeks kind of putting together a simple one-pager. Actually, it hasn't changed. It's the same homepage that we have today. And but you don't even need to set up a website. You could really just kind of put it together in like an email or something. And that was my next step. Was I sent a warm email to about 20 or 25 contacts, like personal friends of mine who work online, who run businesses, just saying, hey, this is the new thing that I'm working on. I'd love to get any feedback or ideas or questions about it. If you happen to know anyone who you think might be a fit, or I'd love an introduction. And just through that warm email, I think I landed the first 3 paying clients for audience ops. But yeah, to your question, we basically had no documentation whatsoever from the very beginning. I had an idea what the bare bones process would look like, but I also knew that we would document it as we go for those very first clients. I think soon after that, I announced the new service on the podcast and the blog, and that brought in like another 3 clients. So we were at somewhere around 6, maybe 7 clients within the first 2 months. And at that point, and I had like 2 or 3 freelance writers working with me at that point. And we started to document and deliver the work, deliver the service on schedule, learning things as we go, trying out different tools as we go, writing procedures and then rewriting them and doing that. And probably by the 3rd month, I actually paused all sales. And like I just stopped taking on new clients. I started to build a little bit of a waiting list so that I can spend the next 2 months really ironing out our processes. Like now that we've established that, okay, we can sell this, we have about 6 paying clients at this point. So we've got cash flow coming in on a monthly basis. We've got a couple team members in place. Now let's make sure that the wheels don't fall off and stop taking on new clients for a little while and really get the systems and the tools and things in place. So we did that for about 2 months. And then we reopened sales again, and it's been growing, pretty fast ever since. But it wouldn't have been able to grow unless we had built that infrastructure. But I also waited until after we had a few paying clients before really spending time to build all the little details. And of course, today we continue to refine the processes and switch tools every now and then, or also as the client base grows. Like now we're a little bit more than a year into it, and I think we've turned a corner where now we have a lot more clients than we did in the early days. So a lot of the things that worked for like the first 10 to 15 clients do not work once you get over 30 clients and a team of, we're up to 16 or 17 people. A lot of them are like part-time, some are full-time. So now it's starting to like add more structure to the team now that we're growing. So yeah, it's kind of an ever evolving thing.
You spoke, or you have great wisdom in that you didn't overly invest a ton of time to launch your idea, but once you had the idea validated and some cash flow coming in, you stopped and got your ducks in a row to make sure that you could move forward, as you said, without the wheels falling off. And I think that's it's a temptation for most folks. If you've got people knocking on your door wanting to give you money, you want to take the money, but that discipline of waiting and really taking the time to put some structure about it, I'm sure has served you much better in the long haul.
Yeah, and I definitely relate to that. I know exactly that feeling, especially going back to my web design days when it was like any client comes your way, you can basically take it on, but then all of a sudden you find yourself dealing with a mess of a client or a project that just became way too big. And what I wanted to avoid with Audience Ops was, especially when it was so early on and it was a brand new company and a brand, and I'm talking about it publicly and everything, I didn't want to start to develop the reputation of, oh, these guys don't deliver, or they promised this and it didn't come out on time or anything like that. And I also just wanted to avoid having that stress both on me and on my team, and making sure that, you know, we can deliver things in like a reasonable way. You know, we take several weeks to develop one article. We're not going to just do one article overnight, and we kind of do it the right way, and it's got to work that way.
Cool. I've got a question from Devender. He's asking, has podcasting helped you target and convert clients that match with your service offerings, or is that more of this my own tack on to the end, or is it more just for the enjoyment of it?
Absolutely, both. I mean, the podcast has been around since probably almost 2 years now. So I was still working on Restaurant Engine, and went through the sale of Restaurant Engine while the podcast was going, and then the launch of Audience Ops. We essentially do it for fun. Jordan and I just talk every week, or sometimes we get too busy and skip a week. But with Audience Ops, I definitely have noticed that I think the majority of clients have come either from hearing my podcast or hearing me on other podcasts. And I think that just goes to show, like, this is the audience. Like, we're talking to online business owners, entrepreneurs, founders. These people tune into podcasts just like I do. For a brief time back in Restaurant Engine, we had started a Restaurant Engine podcast for the restaurant industry, and that didn't have any legs at all. We kind of shut that down pretty quickly because restaurant owners aren't listening to podcasts, you know. But with Audience Ops, and it's not even like my Bootstrapped Web podcast is really like about Audience Ops or promoting it. I talk about it like, here's what's going on behind the scenes, but I think it's just part of what helped Audience Ops was that I did have a little bit of an audience between my newsletter and the podcast, and that helped it get its first batch of clients. Since then, we've built up, you know, more inbound traffic and referrals, and like client leads are coming in that don't necessarily know me. So yeah, I think it's a mix, but yeah, podcasting. You know, whenever I ask new clients, like, how'd you hear about it? You know, listen to the podcast. And so at some point I'd like to even start like an Audience Ops podcast for that reason, because, you know, and have the team, you know, be involved in hosting it and things like that. So. Excellent.
Follow-up question from Jackie. She said, how did you arrive at the pricing model for Audience Ops, and is it sustainable in its current place?
Yeah, it's a good question. Pricing is like it's an art and a science, you know. For the most part, at the very beginning, I priced it based on gut feel, and actually the pricing hasn't really changed all that much since the beginning. I don't think. It will change. I know that later this year we're planning to roll out a couple of add-on services, a couple of new products that will change the structure and probably increase the price of the service piece a little bit. But yeah, it is sustainable. It's been profitable since day one, and it continues that same profit margin as it grows too. And you know, I've been keeping a pretty close eye on that. I mean, I think early on the way that I came up with it was just taking a back of the napkin look at what the costs would be to deliver this service, and then just monitoring it over the first few months, and then as the thing grows, continuing to monitor it and keep an eye on costs and all that. But yeah, it's been profitable and working. So
awesome. Yeah, the pricing, I've talked about pricing with quite a few of my guests, and that's always how did you arrive at the price? And sometimes it's just, throwing spaghetti at the wall, and sometimes, like you said, kind of going through and roughing out what the costs are. But
yeah, I mean, I have, I guess another big factor that goes into it is figuring out who the target client is, who the most ideal client is, and what is a price point that would be palatable for them. And I like to position audience ops, because this is what it is. It's positioned as an alternative to hiring somebody full time. So for an established software company or an online service, if you're going to deliver a content marketing plan the way that we deliver it, with all the pieces that we put in place for you, you would essentially have to have at least one full-time employee just focused on that. And we're giving you a whole team to deliver all those pieces for less than what it would cost to hire a full-time employee. So that's essentially that's another way to look at it. It's what's you can call that like value-based pricing, and how important content marketing is to your overall strategy and everything. So
you could make that one of your marketing things. There's a plugin I love, or it may already be, but there's a plugin I love, Migrate DB Pro.
Oh yeah, Brad's thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and on their sales page they have, this plugin costs X. I can't remember what it is. And if you charge X an hour, and in 3 hours you've paid for this and then some, or saved yourself this much money. So I'm like, that's perfect. You're creating a price anchor against hiring what the actual cost would be to have an employee doing those services. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if Brad does this on his site, but I saw it on Brennan Dunn's site. Are you familiar with Brennan?
Yeah, I've actually had him on the show.
Oh, cool. He, on his, I think it's for his Double Your Freelancing Rate course, he's got an actual calculator. Like, you enter your hourly rate, and it's like, after implementing the strategies, you should expect whatever it is, I don't know, like 5x increasing your rate, and this is what that amounts to, or you can buy this many MacBook Pros, or something. He has something like that where it like actually calculates for you.
This, because we all need more MacBook Pros.
Exactly.
I do. I'm waiting for a new one to be announced before I bite the bullet on that. That was a total aside. So with a productized offering, you're tightly scoping what it is that you deliver. What happens, and maybe this was more likely to happen at Restaurant Engine than Audience Ops, but what happens when someone comes and they want something that's a little outside of that scope? Do you just shut it down? Do you refer it out to other vendors, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It does take a lot more saying no than what I used to do with being a freelance web designer. You could essentially do anything. You need an e-commerce site? Okay, let's go get WooCommerce and get that going. Or you need a membership? Then you go do this. And it's with Audience Ops, we've made some exceptions, so it's kind of a case-by-case basis. But the goal overall with any productized service, and we really do stick to this for the most part, is we try to reduce the amount of variation from client to client as much as possible. Because every time a client has a special case or a special piece of instructions that, like, they want their blog posts to always have the featured image with a blue background instead of what we normally do, or something like that. Every little one of those introduces another potential error on our end. And for our team, and we have systems in place to note down like special instructions, but we just try to keep those to a minimum as much as possible. And like one example, for a little while, we had some clients who, for whatever reason, they weren't using WordPress for their blog. Maybe they were on Squarespace or something else. And our whole process, like, we don't just write it. We actually set it up in your WordPress blog and publish it for you. And so if we don't have access, so first of all, like, we're not going to go publish it in Squarespace for you. Like, our team is trained on WordPress. Plus, we use our own WordPress plugins to do certain things. So, for us to translate all that to something like Squarespace or some custom CMS or something like that, just for one or two clients, just doesn't make sense for us. And even if we can do it from a resource standpoint, it's just not the most efficient way. We would probably make mistakes and we wouldn't be able to QA it the way that we would normally do. So in some cases in the past, what we did was for those clients not using WordPress, we just don't do the WordPress piece and we'll just send you like the Google Doc of the finished article and you guys set it up. And that worked okay, but we still ran into problems because the client didn't publish it on the schedule that we gave them, and then we can't do the social media promotion for it, and so it just created all these headaches. So just recently we decided like, okay, that's it. All clients must be using WordPress, and like 90% of them were already using WordPress anyway, and just that last 5 or 10%, we have to tell them like, hey, we need you to either migrate over to WordPress, or if you're not on it, then it's just not. We might be a good fit in terms of the client and the audience, but you wouldn't get the most benefit out of Audience Ops unless we have control over the whole publishing process.
Good boundaries. So in the case of, hey, you need to migrate over to WordPress, would that be something you'd refer out, or another branch of Brian Casel, the freelancer?
No, yeah, we do have we've got like a canned response that says, here are a couple of companies who they specifically do WordPress migrations. Here's a couple of WordPress hosting options. You can check out WP Curve if you need some support for your WordPress site. We give them all these resources to make it as easy as possible if they do want to migrate over.
Cool. Sorry, I couldn't get my hand off the mute button quickly enough. Defender has another great question. He says, what are the challenges and learnings when building your team of people to support the product offering? Like, are any kind of hiccups you now know to watch out for when you're onboarding team members or getting them used to a process?
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things about growing any kind of company is to, especially if you've been working solo for a while, as I was, and just learning how to manage a team it's a never-ending learning experience. I had been working with team members for years, even going back to the web design days. I would subcontract out to other freelancers and at times grow the team up to a group of like 4 to 6 designers and developers working under me on like a freelance basis. So I had kind of dipped my feet in that way for a few years in terms of learning how to manage people, learning how to manage expectations and that sort of thing. With Restaurant Engine, I started to get a little bit more into, okay, what is it like to have full-time people with working for me 40 hours a week? That's another new dynamic, because when you get to that step, what you need to figure out is like the difference between hiring a contractor for just one project is, okay, we have this project, we need X, Y, and Z done, we have the budget for it, now we just got to find somebody who can do that and do it under budget. But when you have somebody on every single week, you need to have enough tasks that are repeatable. Like things need to be happening in your business that just always need to get done week after week to keep that person busy. And that's where we get back to, okay, if you do a focused service where you're doing the same thing week after week, then you know that this is a task that you can assign to someone as part of their weekly job description. If you're just doing project to project, what I did early on was I had like a virtual assistant one of my very first years ago, and I wasn't ready for that. I was super busy, so I thought that I needed to hire, but I didn't have my work ironed out into repeatable weekly tasks that just consistently happen all year long. It wasn't until Restaurant Engine was more established that it was like, okay, every week we do an email newsletter. Every week we're onboarding clients, and this is the process for doing that. And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is making sure that you have enough repeatable work. But I would say, definitely start with part-time freelance contract and kind of work your way up to full-time, if that makes sense.
It does. Where are you sourcing your employees?
So with Audience Ops, we've got about, I think, something like 16 people on the team. All of our writers and all of our managers are US based. So all over the US, like all corners of the US. I think there's 8 or 9 of them. And then we've got a couple of assistants in the Philippines. And they're fantastic. We've got 4 in the Philippines. And we've got our graphic designer who's in Argentina. But he actually travels a lot. And several members of our team travel the world and live in, they're like digital nomads, which is really cool because we're on Slack every day posting pictures and stuff. I think that's and I do work with a couple of developers on our plugins, and they're in the Ukraine. So we're all over the place.
How did you actually find him? Was it through your network of people that you already knew?
Yeah, I find different people from different different roles from different places. Some of the writers and the managers have come because they tune into the podcast and they came in that way. I do post a lot. At this point, we hire a lot. Almost every month we're interviewing and hiring people. So I post regularly to like Authentic Jobs, inbound.org. We work remotely has been pretty good. I found some of the assistants on Upwork and Virtual Staff Finder has been helpful. What else? I think that's the developers I've hired through Upwork. So
good resources. I will be adding those to the show notes for you guys who are listening. Is that a lab behind you, a black lab?
Oh, you see him? Yeah.
I hear a little bit of a whine, and I know what it sounds like because the same thing is coming from my back door right now. I've got a couple labs, and yeah, they are sad if they can't be underfoot at all times.
Yeah, he either wants to come in here or he wants to go outside and run around, one or the other. But,
so let's see, we're a little over the halfway mark. So if you've got some questions for Brian, go ahead and get those in on either Twitter or the Google Q&A app. I teased that I had a special announcement coming for today's show. And Brian, if you'll indulge me just a moment, I'll make that announcement. But I've alluded to it the past couple of episodes, but today I'm officially soft launching the Office Hours FM community. And you can access that over at my.officehours.fm. And what I've envisioned this being is it's based on BuddyPress and BBPress. So it's got forums, private groups, exclusive content that's not going to be available via the regular podcast. And what I really want it to be is sort of like a gigantic mastermind, if you will, an opportunity to take some of the conversations that we're having during the podcast offline, or actually technically it's still online, but to be able to discuss those in more detail and to challenge each other and encourage each other in our business. So check that out if you're interested. I'm doing a first 30 days for free on that because it is, I know it's rough right now. To your point, Brian, I'm launching sooner than later and getting it out there, and I'll refine as I go. But anyways, I didn't feel good charging anybody before there was, when things are still kind of wonky. But check that out.
That sounds awesome, by the way. And I'm in like a weekly mastermind group with 3 other people, and I've been in private forums, a couple of those like communities and things, and those have been so valuable for me over the past couple of years. Just being able to have like a private place to talk about business, talk about behind the scenes, and there's some public forums that you can go on, but it's a completely different thing when you're behind closed doors, and I think that's really important.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that bit of validation. You are more than welcome to come and join us as well. We'll pick your brain about productized consulting. So a lot of folks that tune into the show are they're freelancers or they're offering some sort of services around WordPress. Some of us have products that we're also selling. But how do you know, like for someone listening to this show and they're thinking, that sounds interesting, I might like to give that a try. What are some sort of the key factors that you're going to look for if in your own business, to see if a productized offering might be appropriate? Is it like, 40% of 60% of my tasks are repeatable tasks, or?
Yeah, Well, I think first of all, it starts as like a personal decision. Like, is this something, like for me, when I started Restaurant Engine, it was like, why would I start Restaurant Engine if I had a perfectly comfortable living as a freelance web designer, which I still enjoyed doing being a designer and combining technology and that kind of stuff. So it's not for everyone, but I had the itch to grow something bigger, to grow an actual company that's not just tied to my time and not billing for my time and requiring me to be at my computer 8 hours a day in order to make an income. And so I was just looking for ways to build a company that can grow and grow in value and all that. So that was the first motivator. And then the productized service model was really just a way to achieve that. But yeah, I mean, the way to start would be to look inward to your own experience, and whether it's technologies or a certain community or an industry that you personally have some unique insight into. You know a thing or two more about this space than most other people do. That gives you more insight to be able to go identify, okay, these people have a problem, and I know that I can solve it. Maybe other people are solving it too, and that's perfectly fine. But you see an opportunity for you to develop a solution that you know will be effective. Of course, it won't be absolutely validated until you start talking to customers and working with paying clients, and that'll be an evolving thing as well. But like for me with Restaurant Engine, not that I had any experience in the restaurant industry, and that was a bit of a challenge, but I did know WordPress pretty well, and that's what allowed me to get up and running with a website builder built on WordPress pretty quickly. Audience ops, like I know content marketing pretty well because that was the main thing that we used in Restaurant Engine. So I'm just looking inward to the things that I can leverage, and also the community. So with audience ops, like I knew from day one, no matter what business this next thing would be, it would have to be for B2B online entrepreneurs. These are my people that I'm already in networks with, and they're already in my audience, and I go to these conferences anyway, so it just makes more sense. So if you can identify these communities or industries that you're already tapped into, figure out what businesses are spending money on, or so you can look at it like things that businesses are actively spending money on, and inserting taking a chunk out of that, essentially. Like I'm looking at it like most online like SaaS companies are hiring content managers or community managers when they could be outsourcing that to a service like audience ops. And so you can start to develop it that way. Another good way is to look at the current client projects that you're working on, and what are the things that keep coming up again and again. Years ago when I was doing web design work, I kept getting asked about mobile sites. Is this site going to be mobile? And that's just an indication that that's really important, and maybe there can be some potential here to focus exclusively on that. The mobile site is just an example, but yeah, just things that you can kind of key into as you look at what you're working on.
What I love that you just said is look at where businesses are already spending money and come and see how you can cut that out and offer it for either less or a better experience. Yep. Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, you think about it's old school, but like Yellow Pages. I had a client.
Yeah, it's a good example.
A shoe salesman, and he still pays. I mean, out the wazoo for Yellow Page ads. I mean, you're like, who the heck even reads Yellow Pages anymore? But I'm like, you take that $1,000 monthly budget or whatever it was, and for a quarter or 75% of that, I can have you blast it out on social media all over the place and getting you much more exposure and da 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 da. So, anyways, that was just sort of an aside, but that's
a really good example too, because you can look at the Yellow Pages and I heard a story from someone who literally did just that, and they called up the Yellow Pages to find out how much it costs to take out like a half-page ad in a Yellow Page, and they were like, it's $10,000 a month or something crazy like that, and so right off the bat, any company who has a half-page ad, they're already spending $10,000 a month. So you can kind of price anchor based on that.
There you go. All right. So everybody can go and get the yellow pages and check
Yep.
check that out. That's funny. I kind of derailed myself on the yellow pages. But okay, so yeah, talking about how do you know when it's kind of the right time to go and who you can pick to offer your services to. At what point is it wise to start bringing in paid help?
Good question. So it depends which stage you're at with it. I think most people will do a lot of the work themselves in the early days. That's certainly what I did with Restaurant Engine. I think for the first year, I was doing most of the work myself. And what that allowed me to do was be extremely close to the customers, close to the process, and really learn the ins and outs of it and get it right before, and document it and get those procedures in place before going out and hiring someone to take over certain pieces of what I was doing. And then eventually over time, with Restaurant Engine over the course of 4 years, I piece by piece took things off of my plate and hired someone for that. So the first thing was customer support. For a while I was doing all these website setups myself and answering questions myself. And then I brought someone in for that. Or in the very first couple of months, I was writing the first few blog posts, and then I started hiring a writer and other members of the team to do promotion. And then by year 2 or year 3, I was still doing all the sales calls. So every day I'd be on the phone with restaurant owners doing sales, to a point where, okay, I need to take that off of my calendar and start to hire a salesperson. So yeah, I think for most people doing this for the first time, it makes sense to do a lot of it yourself until you have the cash flow and the process really dialed in, that it makes sense to start bringing someone in. With Audience Ops, I had a little bit of a runway, and I did start from day one with a couple of writers, but there was still a lot that I did myself. Even up until this day, only recently I started bringing on a salesperson to do most of our sales calls. And I'm still heavily involved, working on the processes and meeting with the team and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think, Audience Ops, the team has grown much faster than anything else that I've worked on. But yeah, I'd say piece by piece, just kind of take it off your plate.
Jackie has a great question. So when you're providing something like Audience Ops does, it's a little bit, or content marketing generals can sometimes be nebulous in terms of results. She says, what metrics do you use, or do you provide to clients to demonstrate the value to them in delivering the content?
Yeah, so we do provide monthly reports that show traffic and organic traffic, social media traffic from email open rates, email engagement, that kind of stuff, and we break it down by each individual post. So we give you some metrics there, and we'll show you this is what happened this month, and this is the comparison from last month. So we actually get access to every client's Google Analytics, and we pull some stats from there and from their Drip account or Mailchimp. And so we look at those metrics. Generally, we see within 3 to 6 months of working with a client, their organic traffic tends to increase pretty significantly, usually by 30% or so. And of course, it's very different from client to client in every industry. But that just comes from the consistency of publishing new content that's relevant to the right people. 6 to 12 months, you start to see that increase even more. But I think the most important thing that our clients care about is the fact that we take this off of their plate. Content is something that they're going to be doing anyway, and it's just a matter of how it's going to be getting done. Are the founders going to be writing it themselves? Are they going to hire a full-time employee? Are they going to hire a freelancer and then have to kind of manage them and do that? What Audience Ops allows them to do is implement a fully dialed in content marketing strategy that we've optimized and really perfected, and we've got all the right team members in place for that. And then it allows them to work on their product. or talk to more customers, or do business development, grow their team. Like those are the things that the founder should be focused on, rather than churning out new blog posts or tweets and Facebook posts every week.
It's a great idea. Audience Ops itself, in terms of your offering, is tightly scoped, but when it comes to content creation, are there particular verticals that you're going after, or your team will just research anything under the sun to be able to produce content, or how do you?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do try to focus on a couple of verticals, not necessarily industry verticals, but so I'd say about 60 or 70% of our clients are SaaS companies, B2B. Software as a service. They're selling some sort of online tool to other business owners. That's probably our bread and butter. So we hire writers who can write for a business audience, an entrepreneurial audience, writing about online business, marketing, sales, product development, that kind of stuff. The other 30%, a large chunk of them are like digital agencies, or a couple of WordPress services, WordPress products, design, user experience agencies. So in that world, we've also brought on a few writers who are also web designers and developers themselves, but they also happen to write. So we can actually write with that expertise of user experience and development and WordPress and that kind of stuff. We've got a couple of clients that deviate from those two camps, but for the most part, we try to focus on like B2B SaaS and digital web design development.
All right. We got a couple minutes left here, so let's talk tools. So you've mentioned like Google Docs and Slack. I'm sure that there are other tools that are helpful in general in a productized environment. Costas asks, is there a service or app that pulls analytics and creates those reports without you having to actually copy paste the numbers?
It's a good question. It's something that we want to develop ourselves at some point. Right now, it's a manual process. We've got like a template Google Doc report, and our team goes into analytics, and they also go into Drip or Mailchimp, and they pull out the stats, and we'll do a little bit of analysis on that too. But we're looking at ways to maybe develop our own, either a WordPress plugin or some other kind of tool to make that reporting a little bit easier, but also focus specifically on reporting on content.
Gotcha.
So we're going to work on that at some point this year. Was that the question?
Well, that was part of it, but it was a multi-part question.
Right.
What are the social media tools that you find helpful?
We set every client up with Buffer. We found that that's just the easiest tool to be able to schedule tweets and Facebook posts in advance. And we, for a while, we did do it in advance. Now we actually wait until the day of the publish date just to make sure that the thing has actually published, so that we could start tweeting about it. But still, we'll schedule tweets out for every new article. We'll do a couple of tweets the first day, a couple later in the week, and then the following week, and we schedule them out over about a month, like 10 different unique quotes and messages and images and things from the post. And so that those are constantly, re-promoting content. And we'll do a couple of Facebook posts as well through Buffer. Right now I'm looking at Edgar as a possible alternative tool, maybe in addition, because that allows you to cycle social media posts. So it's not just scheduling in advance, but you could actually have the same post recycled after several months. And we've had a couple of clients ask about that. So we're looking at that to see if it's something that maybe we could add into our process.
Well, yeah, Buffer's actually, you would think they would allow that or enable that.
Yeah.
I've tried that out myself. Any other tools that are sort of essential for you?
We're heavy into Drip. I don't know how many of your listeners are into that, but it's awesome for email marketing. I like to think of Drip as kind of the next step up from Mailchimp. and it's just as powerful as something like Infusionsoft or Entreport or some of these other things. But Infusionsoft is just way too complicated and clunky to deal with. I don't know if anyone has ever touched it, but to me, it's kind of a nightmare to deal with. Drip and what Rob Walling and his team have built there has been fantastic. So we kind of specialize in that for our clients, where we'll not only use it to send out email newsletters, but we'll set up email automation flows. So you can actually set up workflows where it's like, if somebody has completed this sequence, then you can kind of route them into this other sequence, and you can tag users, and you can do all these automation rules, and we set that up. We have our own set of WordPress plugins that we use for our clients, and we also sell as standalone plugins on the Audience Ops shop. And so one is called Content Upgrades, and so that allows you to offer bonus content with individual articles. So and we do this for every article that we do. So we'll write the article, and then we'll create like a checklist or a template or a worksheet of some kind, and we use our Content Upgrades plugin to embed like an email opt-in in the middle of the blog post. So the bonus content that we're giving away is highly relevant to the topic of that article, which helps that convert really well. And so what our plugin does is allows you to embed that opt-in, click it, it gets a pop-up, and then it will email the bonus content to the user after they opt in, and then it passes that subscriber info over to Mailchimp or over to Drip. And so it's just a really good way to build your list and add more and more entry points into your list. A newer plugin that we came out with about a month or two ago was the landing pages plugin, which makes it easy to launch a landing page regardless of which WordPress theme you're using. I mean, what I had always used to do was, whatever theme I'm using, if I want to launch a landing page for, say, an email course that I just launched, I'd have to like hack apart my theme just to make a template that's a stripped down landing page with an email opt-in. And this plugin allows you to tack that on to your site no matter which theme you're basically using. And we use that for our clients as well. So
creating products out of the service that you're providing, creating products to basically make your lives easier. And you're selling them, so then you get a bonus on both sides.
Leveraging our byproducts basically. So
very cool. Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of the show. If there are a couple of questions that didn't get answered, I apologize. Brian, maybe you'll check the hashtag OfficeFM later and say hello to some folks. But Brian, where can people find you to say hello? Where can they find your podcast? Where can we stalk you?
Sure. So my personal site is castjam.com, and there on the homepage, I've got a free email crash course on building a productized service. If that's something that you're interested in, that's a good introduction to my newsletter if you want to get on that. My podcast is bootstrappedweb.com. We talk mostly every week, but we've been a little bit too busy lately. And then audiencetops.com is my company. That's where I'm doing a lot of my work these days. So, yep.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you.
I'm also CastJam on Twitter.
CastJam on Twitter. All right. I found you. I've already been stalking you for a while. Well, I appreciate your time today very much. Those of you who are listening live or maybe catching this after the fact, please do go check out my.officehours.fm. I would love to hear your feedback. And until next week, have a fantastic weekend. Bye.